KIC, and it has consortia that includes 6 countries: Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Greece, Germany, Bulgaria, and Romania. And what these 6 countries actually represent are joint forces without any competition, as a proof that only together we can make a change. And this project arose as a need and desire to change the things for the better, creating a unique ecosystem that will help implement circular business models and open the door to implementation of circular business economy into existing ones. And we're carefully supporting small and medium enterprises and helping them and making them easier to implement circular economy business model to implement into that existing one. And we need to really admit that this project was very successful last year, and we build a strong connection and network between all the partners and people interested in circular economy all around Europe. And I guess we would lie if we said that we don't expect even better results this year. Because from day to day, we're bigger drivers of change that we strive for. When you heard this short story about what is Circular Economy Beacons project, I would like to announce our first speaker, and that is Mr. Andrej Jejka. He's a partner, and he's also a Chief Impact Policy Officer of Sporos platform. Andrej, if you can hear us, you can share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak to you all this morning. Allow me 2 seconds to share my screen. So my name is Andrej Jejka. I'm a partner and the Chief Policy and Impact Officer at the Sporos platform, which will be the first impact investment fund focused on circular economy. 1 second, because I would like to stop my camera to make sure that the signal won't drop in the middle of the presentation. And I will be speaking to you today about financing the circular economy, the right approach for accelerating the transition. So we started working at Sporos platform on the back of the growing realization by governments and policymakers from 2015 onwards that the Paris Agreement will not be sufficient to stave off a global warming beyond 1.5 degrees. Since its focus is primarily on energy baskets and energy efficiency, and that production modalities need to be addressed. This was what pushed the European Commission in 2015 to not amend a decades-old waste framework directive, but to substitute that with a first circular economy package. This also reflected the fact that the European Commission has started to think of waste differently in a more systemic view, since the first circular economy action plan covered the whole life cycle of products, from production to consumption to waste and to secondary raw material markets. And this is actually one of the reasons that makes a circular economy a global megatrend that is only destined to increase in importance in the coming years. First, there's the volatility in the commodity markets over the last 2 decades that makes the sourcing of raw materials unpredictable and thus risky. Then there's a second driver, which is stakeholder action, primarily climate activism, but also an increasing trend of sustainability influencing consumer purchasing choices. And finally, the third driver behind the circular economy is the regulatory push from the most advanced economies on the planet, starting with that circular economy package of the European Commission from 2015. The only workable solution at government's disposal at present when it comes to addressing production is to circularize the economic system, since now we have the financial means, we have the tools, the technologies, but also the political will to do so. This is reflected not only in the EU Green Deal, but also in the fact that circular economy is now a horizontal objective for the entire multi-annual financial framework for 2021-2027, that the Recovery and Resilience Facility financed by Next Generation EU foresees that 37% of the 750 billion euro budget has to be allocated for the green transition. And most recently, by the agreement reached between the EU co-legislators, namely the European Parliament and the Council, after a 14-hour negotiation, on a provisional agreement on the European climate law, which locks in the European Union to becoming carbon neutral by 2050. The biggest challenge, however, will be to direct financial resources there where they are needed the most, which is SMEs. Most funds in the past decade or so have been focused either on infrastructure or tech-heavy startups, but the European economy is made of approximately 25 million SMEs, accounting for 99.8% of all enterprises in Europe. So it becomes quite obvious that you cannot have a transition to a circular economy without addressing producing SMEs. Now, of course, investments in green technology and innovative startups are necessary as they provide the smart solutions that SMEs can then deploy. But there can be no talk of a circular economy unless you address the 99.8% of the components of that economy. So let's have a look at what these SMEs look like when it comes to transitioning towards a circular economy. When designing Sporos platform, we commissioned a market study to understand how ready the Greek economic system and especially Greek SMEs are for a circular economy. And it was a nationwide survey at top management level. And what we found from this is that a good majority of these companies consider fighting climate change as at least somewhat important for their long-term strategy, but an even greater majority of these companies do not use any technological means to monitor their inputs or their outputs and have not made a single year on investments in research and development activities for the past 3 years. This is highly problematic since achieving carbon neutrality means that a big chunk of these companies will have obsolete production models. And I'm not saying less competitive, but obsolete, meaning that a good majority of these companies are actually at risk of closing. Now, according to our market study, but also to research done by public policy institutions, there are basically 3 main reasons why it's difficult for SMEs to transition to circular business models. First, they are unaware of existing solutions and tools on the market to help them make the transition, simply because they have very limited human and financial resources to find out by themselves. Second, they lack the internal expertise on how to apply those solutions and tools to their business models. And thirdly, despite the skyrocketing of ESG investments in the past 3 years, the current banking system, which is the go-to financier for SMEs, especially in Southeast Europe, does not have the mentality, the risk propensity, nor the tools to properly cater and advise SMEs on how to use the money to transition towards a circular economy business model, because this requires a systems thinking that bank structures are simply too rigid to apply. Now, for the past decades, as globalization increased, people have started to become more and more aware of how interconnected things are. And it is this particular important mental shift of horizontal systems thinking that allows a concept such as circular economy to even be possible. Now, this is required not only within a company to track the whole life cycle of a product and understand how both inputs and outputs affect the environmental footprint of what they make, but also outside the company to see the connections between your production and those of others around you, so that you can see where there's complementarity and with whom you have to collaborate in order to close the material loop, especially when you consider that they might be in completely different industries, like for example, construction and agriculture, where you use crop waste to make ultra hard cement, or tourism and space to use satellite deformation in order to plan itineraries, or shipping and offshore wind farms to make hydrogen through electrolysis to make green fuel for ships, and so on and so forth. Now, this is why we at Sporos Platform have tried to address these challenges by creating a tailor-made financial tools for specifically for SMEs that do not focus so much on collateral, but rather on future performance. We have also created a dedicated committee called the Circular Board to bring together the widest expertise possible from multiple sectors of the economy, so that these sectors can talk with each other and come up with common solutions to common problems. And we also accompany each investment with dedicated consultancy services to make sure that the investee can reach its financial and non-financial goals. And it is this type of horizontal systems thinking and the breaking of silo mentalities that are necessary if we really want in 2050 for the circular economy to simply become the economy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you. Thank you for this great presentation and speech that you have, and to explain everything to our guests. So our next speaker that I will introduce you to is Mr. Vedat Sulic. He's the CEO of Regional Education and Information Center for Sustainable Development in Southeast Europe, RAIC. So Berat, you can join us.
Yeah, I think we cannot hear you at the moment. Can you try to switch the channels of the microphone or something?
Berat, can you hear us? But we cannot hear you.
How about now?
Yes, perfect.
So I kindly ask you just to allow me sharing the screen.
Should be done.
All right. So I hope all you can all see my slides.
Yes.
So thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure seeing a great number of people in this webinar. So I will talk from a little bit another perspective about the circular economy, and in general, I would like to emphasize some pitfalls or some misunderstandings which are mostly made when talking about circular economy. So I'm by background master of environmental economics, and definitely I'm looking at the circular economy from a business point of view. And that's how I will approach also this presentation. And I have some maybe provocative questions that I would like to discuss with you maybe during the discussion later on, or if you have some questions, so I would welcome them. So in general, I would like to start with a very provocative question, and my purpose is not to answer this at this moment, so just to start thinking about whether there is a significant product. So we have on the left-hand side hand washing appliance for washing clothes. On the other side, on the right side, we have
Sorry to interrupt. We have some technical issues with your microphone. Sometimes it's very loud, sometimes it's very quiet. Do you maybe need some minutes to exchange it or to try to fix it? If that's the case, we can switch presentations and I can take over for until you switch, or let's try to fix it on the way.
Yeah, just give me 1 minute, please. Sorry for.
Okay, fine. We don't hear you at all.
How now?
Now better.
Okay. Sorry for that. I hope. I don't know what's happening. So usually it works very well. So that's
Technology.
Yeah. So sometimes it brings good, sometimes not. So I don't know how much did you catch me. So again, sorry for the inconvenience listening to me. This is a very provocative question. I don't have, my intention is not to provide the answer, but just to start thinking about it. And during the presentation, actually, I will, in another way, touch on this, the questions on this. So in general, when I'm thinking about the circular economy, there is a thought which is always following me. And this is that it is possible to predict technological development, but it's not possible to predict the impact of the technology on society. And I think this is one of the key reasons why currently the circular economy is not taking place to the extent which people like us who are working in the field of circular economy are willing to have. So it's almost impossible, or it's very hard to predict how any kind of technology will have impact onto the society. And I think that the circular economy
has its impact and has to be considered from this point of view and not just the environmental point of view, which is often the case. So I would like to start with this basic example. So what did we have in the past where old-fashioned products had more or less similar technical and use or life cycle? And it was almost completely the same. So we use our old phones until the moment they died. So they couldn't provide any service further. Today, with fast innovations, we have that the use cycle is far, far lower than the technical cycle. We are all aware of the fact that we change, for instance, smartphones or any kind of other consumable goods much faster than it actually could last. So, and the result between the use cycle and the technical cycle is in most of the cases waste. In some cases, for instance, if we have a smartphone or other similar consumable goods, it's handed out to relatives or somebody who is willing to use it more. But in most of the cases, it's actually becoming waste, or the other product which is substituting it is becoming waste. In general, a study in 2011 showed that 80 products of which are manufactured, so different kind of products, not just mobile phones, are disposed within the first 6 months of their lifetime. So which is very, very short indeed. All of the products are designed to last much longer than these 6 months. So, and that's one of the reasons, for instance, when we look at the electronic waste generation worldwide from 2010 to 2019, it's increasing dramatically. So, and especially it's present in all kinds of communities in all kinds of countries. So no matter how developed this country is, this pattern is present in all of the countries worldwide. But on the other hand, what we have is that, for instance, the leading technology providers like Apple is increasing revenues dramatically, and they definitely follow the linear model of economy, although in some points they declaratively follow the circular economy model, but indeed it's a linear model. This is the end picture what they have. So they have an increase of sales from year by year. As you can see, the dark blue color is the iPhone, so which had a little slowdown after 2015. But other products like the iPad, the iPod, Mac, and other products and their services have contributed to a continuously rise of revenues. And this is again one of the reasons presented, the reason behind, or the rationale behind this is actually presented in the slides before, where we very, very quickly change mobile phones or any other consumable goods. So actually the question we have to ask ourselves, what do we actually need? Do we need a drill or we need a hole? Do we need a light bulb or we need the light? Or for instance, do we need a project beamer or we need the screen we look at? So indeed, we need what's presented here on the right side. So nobody, especially people who are hobby workers, do not need a drill. There are some estimations, for instance, that the average drill is working 10 to 20 minutes a year in its lifetime, which is very low actually and why taking a decision to buy it for such a low period of use. So there are plenty of other examples like these, but what I want to emphasize here is the circular economy is about the function of the product, not the product itself. And that's how I consider the circular economy, not just from the environmental point of view, but also on packaging, to say so, the product, the services within the circular economy through their functionality or through their utility. So businesses which implement circular economy can have various different types of values, and the environmental value, which are definitely the benefits from an improved ecological footprint, for instance, are clearly present, but in most of the cases, this is a mistake for considering the only value for a business implementing the circular economy, and a lot of NGOs or a lot of decision makers consider the circular economy mostly or only through this component, through the environmental benefit. However, there are many other values a business can achieve through circular economy, for instance, through the sourcing value that can, and through closed loop business practices, improve the availability of critical materials, especially those integrated into mobile devices or other technology devices. But I would like, and where my focus more is on those two other, the customer value and the informational value. Customers who are purchasing products from companies who are providing a circular economy or who are implementing circular economy tend to be more loyal. Then they tend also to communicate, and it's a two-way stream of communication between the customer and between the producer, which is not the case, or it's not often the case in a linear economy where it's just about selling, and that's where the communication actually starts and stops. However, in the circular economy, this communication is present all the time, and this provides to the producer valuable information about the product, about its pros and cons, what can and should be improved, etc. And also the informational value about all the data which is integrated into a product and how it's providing services to the clients, and what also can be improved, etc. So the business environment within a circular economy is very, very complex. So on one hand, the ecosystem is one of the segments of circular a business has to take care of, and it's mostly again it's a fatality to consider just the ecosystem as relevant for circular economy. So what also has to be taken into account are technologies, our institutions, so decision makers, government authorities, etc., business strategies, and most important or very important, user practices, which has to do with behavior, with changes in behavior, etc. And as you can see, they are all interlinked. So we cannot consider technology without considering user practices, without considering the institutions, or in the other way around, to consider business strategies without considering the ecosystem, the institutions, etc. And on the left side, this is the perspective from one company or one business environment within a company. On the other hand, this is just one of the systems, so which is again interlinked with the other systems, and this is something which has been touched on the previous also presentation. So the systematic thinking about the circular economy and how to approach it. The wider system doesn't have to be just space-bound. So in terms of, for instance, geographical scope, it can be also time-bound. So the scope circular economy environment is set up has more dimensions. So not just the spatial dimension, but also the time dimension. Again, the circular economy and any other, I would say, approach implemented in an organization and business has to face a very complex meta system, which is presented here in the figure on this slide. Is something I like to share when talking about, for instance, about the Green New Deal and climate action and climate finance. Something which is developed by the World Economic Forum, which shows the linkages of different kind of risks and threats the humankind is facing today, such as the green color, which can be grouped into the environmental group, like extreme weather, climate action failure, biodiversity loss, etc. But also we have other issues: food crisis, water crisis, migration, terrorism, immigration, cyber attacks, unemployment, etc. And we cannot think about any kind of approach without considering all these risks. In some point there are more, in some point there are less relevant, but they are always relevant to some extent. And that makes the approach towards circular economy even more complex and even more complicated. So towards a circular economy in the business, what I consider is important when integrating is to focus on the value, not the product or service itself. So the product or service itself is just a means to provide the value to the end consumer. On the other hand, the manufacturer in a circular economy should strive to retain the ownership of the product, and thus all the materials embedded in the product remain actually owned by the producer itself. And also through a smart design in the very early phase of designing the product, the materials can then be easily or can be extracted from the products and used for new ones, either through recycling or refurbishment or whatever. However, they become actually the warehouse of materials. And this is one of the segments, it's not the only one, of course, but one of the segments a circular economy could be approached when applying into, into a business. So I would like now to share some of the examples for companies which implemented different modalities, I would say, of circular economy. So one of them is product as a service. For instance, Vodafone or Philips, which Philips is not selling light bulbs, they are selling light measured as lumens, or actually selling lightning, not a light bulb as a product. Or a model called Lifetime Extension, Caterpillar, which is designing their machinery in the way that after the lifetime is reached, so after the end of the lifetime, most of the components from the machinery can be reassembled and used for new machineries. Also, product transformation in BMW, the BMW or DSM, for instance, they are collecting all materials from all vehicles in BMW and producing new components. For instance, from plastic, they produce a lot of components which is installed in the cabin of the car from previous BMWs. And also something which gained popularity in recent years and faced some problems in the COVID era is the shared consumption approach. For instance, Airbnb, Flixbus, Uber, or many other examples which have a very unique business model, and I'm pretty much sure that you are all aware of this kind of models. So these are some of the examples of different types of business models within the circular economy. The example I mostly like and I like to share is Mud Jeans. It's a company based in the Netherlands and one of the pioneers, I would say, when it comes to application of circular economy in the clothing industry. They started some 7 years ago in the Netherlands, and now are worldwide present through their online shop, but also through in-house stores. So the business model is quite unique. So there is no classical selling of a jeans, but rather leasing of a jeans. So yes, you heard it right. So you don't own the jeans, you lease it for a specific amount of money. So the way of communication with Mud Jeans is presented in the lower part of the picture, where you first of all sign up with Mud Jeans and then select your jeans you would like to lease, which is then shipped to you. You start the leasing period, which can be 1 year, 2 years, after which you can decide whether you keep the jeans or you swap it. If you swap it, you give the old jeans and pick a new one and continue paying the lease. The old jeans is going to Mud Jeans and is being recycled. In this way, waste at Mud Jeans almost doesn't exist, or is a very, very, very low level, and is a very good example of how circular economy can be integrated into clothing industry, and it's also an example on how startups can become very, very successful businesses, which is in the case of mud jeans, certainly. Also, Philips, I mentioned, Veolia is another example where there is not sales of equipment or products, but rather of the utility itself or the use itself. Veolia is the largest Europe-based ESCO company from France. They are actually selling comfort in terms of heat comfort, in terms of ventilation, etc. So again, Philips is selling lighting, not light bulbs. Indeed, they sell also light bulbs, but they have also a special unit just providing this kind of services. So all these are examples where the user, the customer itself, is interested in buying and purchasing only what he or she needs. In the case of Philips, we need light, so nobody needs light bulbs. And also in terms of Veolia, we need something which is heating us. So we don't need the facility, the boiler, the radiators, etc. So these are some of the examples of circular economy in place. So I'm coming back to the question, and again, I don't want to respond, but just to remind whether to change the initial answer you maybe had at the beginning about this picture. And I want to finish with this slide, which is opportunities for circular and common economy in the post-COVID world. So I'm sure that many of the participants have also their thoughts, and I would like to hear from them. So this is how I see it, and what some of the opportunities are. For instance, for local manufacturing, the COVID pandemic showed us that there was a huge shortage of availability of raw materials in some point of time, and that manufacturing has to be rethinked, and how to ensure that local manufacturing is present in a more to a more extent as it is today. Also, waste management of infectious waste, especially in hospitals and healthcare facilities, is something where circular economy could face opportunities. Reshaping the construction industry. All of us, I guess, remember the 10-day hospital in Wuhan and how it was set up just in 10 days. So this is, again, one of the examples how circular economy models can take place and, for instance, can be planned also in the future, not just for hospitals, but also for other facilities. We also faced a dramatic change in the food pattern. More and more people are choosing local organic farming. I'm personally buying organic products for years, but it's very hard to have them today here because more and more people are buying them. This doesn't have to do too much directly with the circular economy, but on the other hand, changing food pattern towards organic products is changing also behavior to general buying greener products. So this is something which will definitely change the behavior and the influence the buying decision for any kind of product. Also, a great opportunity for circular economy is the transport sector, especially the aviation and mass transportation faced huge losses during the COVID pandemic. This is something where circular economy can help to achieve a more resilient transport sector, because I personally don't believe that COVID is the last pandemic I will face in my lifetime. So perhaps there will be similar shocks to the world in the years coming. And also, last but not least, digitalization is something circular economy, not just circular economy, but many other aspects of our life, but also circular economy can build on. Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 3D printing is something which can help to also improve the resilience of supply chains. And this is actually what I wanted to finish with. So I'm open for discussion and questions later during the webinar, and I hope that the audio was good. Thank you.
It was really good. Thank you, Vedad, for this interesting insight into system of circular economy from some different perspectives, and that you showed us what are real values and example of circular economy business. Thank you.
Yeah.
Once again, I would just like to remind all the participants to feel free and send us some questions for our speakers, and we will get to answer on 3 to 4 more most frequently asked questions in a Q&A session. And now I would like to announce our final speaker, and that is Mr. Milan Veselino, an expert in the field of industrial ecology and circular economy, and also CEO of the Center for Circular Economy, Tirekon. Milan?
Tina, thank you very much. So it was a pleasure listening to both Vedad and Andrei on their views. I do have some of the reflections on their presentations that are actually not only my reflections, but the reflections of the projects. But I will come to them later. Firstly, I would like also to thank the whole audience for participating and actually being very live and asking questions. Be sure that we will answer them. And I also kindly ask for both Vedad and Andrei to go through the chat box. If they see something that is reflecting their position, let's try and have some comprehensive answers from more than one side. So next 10 or 15 minutes, I would like to dedicate to the topic of value chain and life cycle aspect, or the life cycle approach. And what are the differences and similarities and potential synergies between them? And to do this, you need to see my screen. Hopefully it works. So very briefly about who we actually are. Tirekon in a nutshell is what we actually try to provide is from 2016 when we started our operations is to modernize, but really to modernize the business system in a responsible way through product service lifecycle management. So you can see in the essence that the lifecycle management is actually part of our strategy, and this is how also we see the management of products and companies. We aim to help businesses prosper following the principles of circular economy and sustainable development. So when we talk about circular economy, we clearly, and it is obligatory for us to take the sustainable development parameters into developing. And that's why this systemic approach is very important, because if we focus only on one side of circularity, we'll definitely have inevitable non-planned consequences on the other side. And therefore, instead of solving the problems, we will just shift the burdens from our region or from our business system to some other. And that's why systemic approach is a must for us. Our goals is threefold: educate and implement modern system solutions, enable profitable economic transition by implementing circular business models, and eliminate waste through a regenerative approach to businesses. So all three actually reflect in a more direct or more indirect way the principles of circular economy. And we saw that through many assessments during the year, we saw that education and thorough and and comprehensive actually understanding of the whole system of circular economy is necessary in order to pinpoint and develop the right solutions. And with these three goals, we are also offering services, but of course I don't want to go to that part. Our recognized role in Serbia, but also beyond, is the implementer of circular systemic catalyzer. And basically, we have started this story of circular economy beacons as an attempt, and now already a successful attempt to connect countries of the region, because we do have a little bit different requirements and needs than, let's call it, a Westerner part of the Europe. And what we wanted to create is an ecosystem of collaboration between our countries in order to synchronize and harmonize our needs, policies, and strivings or goals, and to enable a bigger market for circular economy. Because departed, it's really not going to work, because except maybe Romania, which is a very, very big market for itself, other countries are pretty small to have the circularity effectively implemented. And if we only have this kind of narrow scope of implementation, we're not going to succeed in a systemic way. We're going to repipe some solutions, but not so much. And at the end, it's expert provided in Serbia and the region. And what we actually want to always have is to one leg anchoring the Western research and development trends, so we can always source and be connected with what is actually happening on the ground with the most advanced countries, or actually in most advanced countries in that regard. So this is what we are, and this is what we do. But now let's jump to the value chain and life cycle differences. What we realize is that many companies, and later on we will see this through some data, it's still under work in progress data, but I'm free to share this with you right now. What we saw is that companies are actually really driven by this value chain definition, and they're gathering data, they're planning as much as possible up until the moment that they are delivering the value to the market. And this value is much more often than not the point of sales, where we have the strategy of sell and forget most of the times, of course, with some additional services that is basically explained in the famous Michael Porter's definition of value chain. On the other side, so basically the value chain is the set of activities that is driving our value up, right? And then we sell it, and then after sales, usually the value goes significantly down. On the other hand, the life cycle perspective is actually a consideration of the impact of a product or a service from the moment of its inception, from the moment of its design and thinking about the product or a service, up until the end of, up until the disposal, or as Vedat has mentioned, up until the end of its useful life, be that the use life or the technical life side. So we have two seemingly maybe conflicting things. One is value driven, one is impact driven, and most probably one would be on the asset side, the other one would be on the cost side of the equation. But actually, we asked ourselves, what if we combine these? And if we go to a little bit more deeper evaluation of the value chain, we have, I don't want to mention all the categories, we have these primary and secondary ones, but you can see that the last 2 points are marketing and sales, and perhaps services. So services are additional services that generate value, that will remain, they will keep you in touch with your customers. They will give you some more extension of the value through repairs, maybe through additional marketing, through additional auxiliary services that are around your service, etc., etc. And comparing to one of the new, let's call it graphics from well, actually, Fana Blonsma and the circular economy, that should be the link down there. Maybe that's a mistake. The point is that the value is driven up from the moment of extraction, then the upstream, and then the downstream, also the downstream creation of value, up until the user is reached, and then it is sold, and the value is, it seems that it is maintained here, but actually it's not. At the moment that we buy the product itself is devaluated. And if I would ask you 2 questions, how much your mobile phone values 1 day or 1 second after you buy it, it's going to pretty much be lower than 80% of its original value. and you will not be able to sell it at the original price. So it is not maintained. It's just the illusion that the value is maintained during the time while the user uses it. What actually happens is it is devalued and the value is destructed. And it is not like this, actually. This is a nice telltale of how the value is destroyed in step by step. But actually, it's not a slope. It's a value cliff. And after we start using it, basically the next time that we want to sell it is maybe 60, 50% of the value, and then it's zero, and then it comes minus below zero, because what we actually have to do on our side as a consumer is we have to pay for the waste management. And instead of maintaining this value, like this, nicely pictured on the right side, we actually have to pay for this mobile phone or whatever we use for the waste management to sell it. That's why if we are aiming for the only and solely for the waste management, it's actually providing a negative value on a bigger scale, and it's not fully sustainable. It will repipe and it will solve some of the solutions, so we definitely need to have this raised to some point, but aiming only for this will not provide a systemic and long-term viability of circular economy. Here, actually, I would like to reflect on Andrei's position where he when he informed us about the obsolete technologies. If we lock ourselves up in the waste management, we will forget about the manufacturing. We will use up necessary resources, maybe partly on the wrong side, and we will face the obsolete technology if the investments and the direction of funds are not going this upstream and downstream on value creation, but on this like slippery slope on the other side. It is basically on the value destruction. On the other hand, what we have is, this is really just a portrait of the ISO 14001 stages of the life cycle. They don't go round and they're not really in this order. This is the most logical way for us to put them like this. So ISO 14001 is telling us that there are 7 stages of one life cycle, which is basically from the moment that one product is designed up until the moment that the product is disposed. And what we realize is that companies do have a lot of data until point number 5, and they have almost zero data from point number 5 to point number 7. Yes, life cycle approach is definitely having one goal, which is to measure the impact of the product. But what we realize, or what we would like to experiment maybe also together with you, is how about we create value throughout the life cycle and put this very much prominently at the forefront of value creation and extend the value chain throughout all 7 stages of the life cycle of one product. What this means is that we're going, what this means actually, that we're losing data. We don't have enough information what's happening in points 5, 6, and 7. What we do miss is we miss the value capturing from the market. And please bear in mind that this data is under construction, so don't please quote it, because up until the end of the year we will have final data. But this is what we come so far. The amount of information from companies reflecting the life cycle stages. So they do have, well, pretty much the 14% on resource acquisition and design. They have pretty much almost the most information about design, because yeah, they're designing their products, right, with the right intentions. Production with 22%, logistics far less with 11%, most probably because they're outsourced and there are some very few criteria on how to choose logistic partners. What is the intended use? There is a lot of data and ideas on this. End of life treatment significantly lower, and disposal, they don't even know what's happening, and they pretty much, up until we asked this question, they didn't even care. But there is another graph. So, and there is one significant difference here. And I will let you dwell on this for maybe a couple of seconds and ask a rhetorical question. What is the biggest difference? And not to keep you too long, the biggest difference is the intended versus the actual use. So the intended use of the product, this is how companies plan that their product should be used on the market with market research techniques, etc. But the actual use of the product and the actual, secondary use and auxiliary use or added use or non-intended use, they're actually less than 5% of this. And this is how we plan versus what we have in the usage system of the product. That means that also the pathways of not directly means, but one of the connected meanings of this lack of data is actually that materials are not being transferred from stage to stage the way that we thought they are transferred. The value is maybe maintained in a different way that we intended it to be, etc., etc. So it's actually also an opportunity for companies to capture and maintain this value throughout these last stages of the life cycle. Okay, this is the slide actually that says this. It's a tremendously lower amount of data and information and ideas also when it comes to intended versus the actual use. And the life cycle approach, basically what we want to create, and this is really from the AIT Climate Kick pool of resources. What we try to do is retain value, not destroy value, with many of the strategies. And first of all, also would like to reflect on Andrei's part is, currently, there is no information on what goes in and what goes out of the company, but very low level of information, and even lower information of what happens after sales. And these strategies are actually capturing all the values after sales. And what changing of business models changes the approach and traceability, and also the strategies of already mentioned in one question, return reverse logistics, are only retaining value for much longer for the participating companies or implementing companies. And if we combine the strengths or combine forces, what we try to do, what we experiment, and also would like to invite you to join us in this, is we consider that building value and investment decision making is possible when we combine these two and try to prolong the value chain creation throughout the whole life cycle. The second thing is extending this decision making twofold. So currently managers are not really aware what happens afterwards. And we can extend the decision-making power in two ways. One is including impacts of social and environmental and economic impacts, basically including the triple bottom line. And secondly, by better capturing value after sales, which is so many times mentioned. And it provides opportunities to build a better understanding about product use and end-of-life patterns. Also, this end-of-life patterns provides better stakeholder management. If we know what are the patterns, we know how to, what kind of relations we want to build with some, up until now, very distant and maybe not even familiar stakeholders that may be crucial, for instance, for reverse logistics and so on. Secondly, build stronger relations with consumer and users pool. By maintaining this constant information and inquiries between users and producers. Number three, builds opportunity for business innovation in an untapped market side, and with those three kind of tactics, capturing the downstream and after point of sale market value with new products and services. Number two is by providing new business models. And number three, by building a new ecosystem approaches. An ecosystem approaches is is a novelty, and basically circular economy beacons is trying to build the ecosystem of collaboration and service, and I will tell maybe a few words after the whole presentation. And as a final note, the primary things that we need to kind of take into account is that we start from design, and all the some of the participants that were following Academy for Circular Economy here in Serbia know that we always like to position that the design is really responsible for 70 to 80% of the environmental effect after this. And in all the workshops that we were working with clients, everything that is already set up, it's really expensive and hard to change. But if we do this in the right time, if we design for circularity from the very moment, from the very first moment, for modularity, for recyclability, for reusability, then the whole system around us will be different, and it will be much easier to manage the whole rest of the life cycle that is in question. So circular design is the first thing we need to take care of. Optimal use is, all right, that maybe for some other iteration. And what we talked about is value recovery and value maintaining throughout the numbers 5, 6, and 7 of the life cycle management part. What is circular? Why circular beacons, and what is our role in this? Well, what we are doing is actually building systemic action plans for companies with the blended approach, where we actually implement some few of cutting edge methodologies into the whole implementation framework. And yeah, as is actually written here. Number 2, we will open a call for companies to find new circular opportunities in late May and June. And this is also the invitation to keep in touch with us, because we will go through the process of designing what would be the circular opportunities for several companies, specifically in Bulgaria, Bosnia, and we will open this also for Serbia. And what we want to create, number 3, is finalize the assessment of benefits. So you could see the under construction. We want to finalize the assessment of benefits, barriers, and blind spots of this blended approach, and improve the whole implementation framework to volume 2.0, which will be perhaps more effective for implementation in countries around the region. Okay, this was really briefly about life cycle and value chain, let's call it synergies. If I'm let, I would just like to underline the circular economy beacon's essence, which is that we're trying to open the collaborative ecosystem on a regional level that concerns only on beneficial systemic approach to circular economy. That means that we tackle bottom up primarily, but we want to enact innovation, and we need to also address policymaking directly or indirectly. That depends on the active actors in each of the countries, but we need to send the voice of what is necessary from the ground level in order to start drafting these systemic policy mixes that would work for countries and for the region itself. What connects us is 4 letters, abbreviated as VIRE, where V stands for values and vision. So all the partners in circular economy beacons are under the same vision and value system. We do share information around our markets in order to facilitate faster, not decision making, but kind of faster overview of what's happening within each of the countries. We do share resources, primarily in human resources, by sharing expertise. So we are very fast to adapt also to requirements in each of the countries or each of the companies. And at the end, well, we also share the experience, and every year we're building on each other's experience from the previous year. So basically we're kind of building the pool of knowledge and experience on a regional level, making the resilient approach to systemic circular economy implementation. Right, thank you very much. And now I would say we're ready for questions.
Thank you, Milan. I would suggest a short 5-minute break just to collect all the questions because we received a lot of them.
Nice.
And yeah, so let's make a 5-minute break and then catch up with all the questions.
Perfect. Play some music. So we're back in 11:15, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
So we can start with reading out loud the questions that we received. Question from Sheila Mahmutovic. I think this is for Mr. Milan. What is your opinion on triple helix and their contribution to circular economy? And can you share some existing examples?
Sheila, actually, very, very good questions. We should definitely keep in touch because I see that you're tackling the issue from the various sides, and that's very nice to see. Triple helix system was our basis from the beginning, but our recommendation is also to include the quadruple helix system because maybe not at the first point, but almost to be almost ready to be applied after maybe the first year of any kind of systemic development, because you want to include media as well, and share the awareness through these kind of multiple channels. Also, what we liked the idea was the quintuple helix approach, being that it implements the environmental aspect on all these 4 dimensions. And that's when we say that our bottom line is the sustainable development. We also always try to, not always try, but actually we aim for quintuple helix here in circular economy beacons. And that means that we are measuring in our assessments, we're measuring the environmental effect of all the activities in a narrower or a broader aspect of the clients and also the systems that we observe. And when you asked about not the proposal but the example, I would say definitely the beacons are following this aspect, and we're targeting at least 3 dimensions of also the MLP, like multi-level perspective. And we are targeting knowledge and innovation. We're targeting government and this policy support. But what we're trying to do is actually bring the voice from the bottom up, and then work together with policymakers in order to, have the strong voice, what is necessary, and then policymakers can actually see what is demanded, what is needed from the market and also from the actors in order to act. We would like this to be the policymakers take the proactive stance, but at the beginning, most probably it will be a reactive stance. And if we don't voice the needs, then there is a risk that we're not going to be heard and as a bottom up kind of a part of the system. And the policies are just going to be made without us being considered. And when I say us, I say also 99.8% of SMEs that Andrei also mentioned. And so the real example is we have tackled the business sector last year primarily. This year we're tackling the business sector together with policymakers. And next year we're targeting to include innovation. That means research center and universities. Maybe it will be even speed up this year, and we will include some of the actors of third dimension already, but they are planned for the next year. But the circumstances are like this, that actually there is much more interesting for many sides on the project, how to be involved in this systemic development. So maybe we'll tackle universities this year as well. I think that's, if I didn't satisfy you, maybe Andrei and Verat can also complement my answer. If not, also Sheila or Seila, if you wish, you can unmute yourself and we can discuss.
Thank you, Milan. I'm fully satisfied with your answer. And thank you for lovely presentations from you and from your colleagues.
Perfect. Thanks, Shayla. Shayla or Sayla? Let's just be precise.
Shayla. Sometimes they call me Sejla.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be addressed to Andre. What are the main obstacles for circular economy to materialize? Andre?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Very topical, I would say. When it comes to SMEs, I would say that the main challenge would be management, also with implications for the public sector. Because more often than not, the organizational structures of SMEs in Europe is family-owned and generational. And this sometimes brings with a certain crystallization, let's say, of the management mentality, where they prefer to stick with what they know in order to protect what they have. So perhaps since the time of their parents or even grandparents. And this implies a certain path dependency that is very difficult to break. And that is why it is necessary to provide SMEs not only with financing, but also with advisory services for them to feel secure enough to take steps in what for them is the unknown, to guarantee their survival, but at the same time also to enhance their competitiveness and growth. And from this perspective, I would also like to latch on a bit to what both Milan and Vedat said in their presentations. For example, it's true that there can be different focuses on different components of a circular economy or its objectives, right? So, for example, for us at Sporos Platform, where we are an impact investment fund, we do focus a lot on the environmental aspects because that's the kind of, and social aspect. That's the kind of impact that we want to see with our investments. But at the same time, that might not make so much sense for the SMEs themselves because they might have different priorities in their minds at that certain point. So for example, we organized the first Athens Circular Forum back in 2019, pre-pandemic times, the before times, where the largest success that we had in that event was a market panel where we brought in companies that we discovered through our market study that have implemented circular economy solutions without knowing that they were circular economy solutions. So they just implemented because they made business sense for them. So for example, there's this large producer of rice in Greece that realized that 80% of the plant was being thrown away because they only needed the little grains in order to package it and sell it. But the rest of the plant was basically thrown away. So instead of doing that, they found a synergy with a cement making company from Germany that manages to insert the cellulose from this plant waste inside the structural the structural components of their cement, which actually improved its chemical and physical properties and resilience. And in this way, the company created a new revenue stream instead of having to pay to dispose of that vegetable waste, created a new revenue stream for itself and used also part of that waste by creating a small biorefinery on site to also cater for part of their energy need. So for them, the focus wasn't necessarily the environmental benefit of this, but it was mostly the cost benefit of this for them. The fact that they had new revenue streams and also a cost reduction on the energy side. So it's very important from this point of view to actually to focus on the different components of circular economy based on your audience, based on who you're talking to. And in SMEs, most often than not, especially traditional SMEs that have been producing for decades, to focus specifically on the monetary aspects of circular economy and its benefits in order to convince them that, yes, these are things that you should do.
Thank you. And when we're already there, I would ask you one more question from Shayla. In the countries which lack circular economy policy framework, what would be the key drivers for SMEs and potential entrepreneurs to start implementing circular economy solutions?
I actually saw this question in the chat box and I wanted to reply to it. So thank you very much for asking me. The most important thing to understand is, well, at least in the European Union, we do now have a framework for circular economy. And at the same time, we also have to adapt the systems thinking, right? Where no single company by itself, especially existing company, not a startup with a new type of business plan, but existing companies cannot become completely 100% circular by themselves. So you need to have a supply chain or a value chain mentality when you decide to change a company's business plans. And at the same time, you might have a circular economy policy framework or an action plan in place, but it's not enough to stay focused there. And for example, in the case of the European Union, towards the end of this year, aside from the revamp of environmental and climate legislation that will happen in June, we will also have new consumer protection legislation coming towards the end of the year that focus on the right to repairability or that insert planned obsolescence or early obsolescence in the list of unfair business practices. So in a sense, all these companies will be forced to change their business models by the framework, right? But by adopting this systems thinking, you also, when you go to the level of the single company, you have to address this from the point of view of needs, right? So, for example, in the case of the company with the rice production, their need was to dispose of their vegetable products differently. And based on this need, you form a new supply chain with another company from the construction sector. So always when it comes to existing SMEs, you need to consider the entire ecosystem and how you connect the different dots. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, you have to give them the reassurances that their ideas can be inserted inside this ecosystem. And for both of them, it's necessary to have both financing ready that can cater for these specific needs, but also those advisory services I talked about, so that they can be sure, okay, I can take risky steps right now. And wherever this need cannot come from the market, we have to remember that 13% of the entire EU GDP is dedicated to public procurement. So there's ample space for the public sector to intervene in the market, like it has done for decades in the European model of capitalism, to actually cater for the specific needs for which business models do not yet exist. And once the public sector does that, it sends a signal to the market, and I can guarantee that then entrepreneurs can pick it up and fill the gaps where it's necessary in order to circularize the entire economic system.
If I can just jump on this and talk also from the perspective of Serbia and the countries that actually do not have aligned policies and legal systems or regulation. Firstly, I just wanted to connect with Andrei's last sentence. Wow, it just slipped my mind. But what we have experienced is that we have reactive and proactive companies, as well as anything else. I mean, policymakers can be, entrepreneurs can be, etc., etc. What we're facing now is proactive companies. And what we don't want to do is that there is always a question, how can I sell circular economy? Either it's pure logic or it doesn't exist for you, and you will be whipped or hit in the head with the tax, and then more often than not, it will be harder to chase the new regulation than it was at the beginning when you were at the forefront of the development. So if you really need to incentivize someone, there are a couple of things that are actually happening. One, now is the open window of change for any kind of systemic transition, because the European Union, at least, is unlocking a lot of funds to support circular transition. And why is that happening? Because it's kind of experimental time. And if you ask for the concrete and rigorous plan, how will we manage circular economy transition? There is no right answer to this. And that's why a lot of funds are going to this experimentation stage. What will happen, and that's also coming from the systemic perspective of managing any kind of transition, is what will happen after this experimental stage, new knowledge will be arisen. Some tests and some pilots will fail, some will produce good results. And based on this, we will have new regulations. And then, much more companies than actually all the companies will have to abide to these new rules. Perhaps there will be some stringent things, such as formulation of new CE mark that requires a decent amount of circular repairability and recyclability of materials. When that comes to place, that's also a driver, or actually not the carrot, but the stick, that if you want to export on European market, you actually need to follow these rules. And if you don't, then you're a whole bunch of export towards the well, the market with the greatest purchase power is actually not going to work until you conform with these new rules. When it comes to local business systems, it's proactive companies that are innovation driven. Usually they're SMEs. And when I say SMEs, it's really small and medium. Very rarely it's micro companies, because they don't have capacity, to have all these data and assessments and kind of pivot around this systemic neighborhood. But if they are entrepreneurial, then one man can lead the show in these micro companies. One man or a girl can lead the show, and they can actually completely transfer to circular economy by searching for new products and pioneering actually and opening their own markets. What Circon is actually doing also is creating its own market now, because there is far less companies that are actually tackling systemic circular economy now. So this is basically a blue ocean, right, market, or blue sea market, where there is a lot of companies. So this could be also a driver. There should be also a driver, pioneering new products and sets. And for bigger companies, the lack of data actually means lack of optimization in the whole production system. So energy bills, water bills, waste bills can be reduced with circular economy in mind. If we're only talking about the production stage, but if you take the whole circularity, it goes the systemic story that I already told. Tiana, no, we can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah. I guess we're running out of time, but I would really like to address one more question for Mr. Vedad. And that is a part of the environmental related aspects. What would be the benefits for a business which implements circular economy? And do you see that COVID-19 is important for changing blocks for circular economy?
Yeah. I mean, I think I touched it a little bit during my presentation, so in some part I will have to repeat myself. Definitely the circular economy is going beyond just the environmental benefits or environmental values. As said, I'm more curious and watching about the behavioral aspect of, and it's kind of the theory of change and how behavior of consumers can be changed. And definitely a business who applies circular economy has a continuously interaction with its consumer, with its clients, which definitely provides informational value, for instance, about the product, about the use of the product, what should and can be improved, etc. It also provides loyalty of the client. Products which are produced within the circular economy tend to have more loyal customers than for instance, in the linear model. So there are plenty of other examples rather than just the environmental, which are for sure very important. In terms of COVID, I would say COVID had its impacts, both positive and negative, on circular economy. For instance, when it comes to the shared business models like Uber, like Airbnb, etc., those business models faced certainly some losses in the COVID pandemic. But on the other hand, also the COVID pandemic showed many sectors which are vulnerable to shocks, such as the pandemic. Tomorrow it can be another shock. So the circular economy can find its ways in, for instance, in supply chain, which definitely can be more resilient to shocks in terms of geopolitical changes, in terms of pandemic change, what we just are still facing. Just remember a few weeks ago the Suez Canal problem we had, etc. So the circular economy can shift focus of the supply chains on a more local manufacturing, and indeed the European Commission is now discussing about the waste loop quota, which can be a tool which will, in the years which are coming, impose for any producer to have a certain amount of the materials designed in a way which can be either reused or recycled in the period after the product is being exploited or used. So circular economy indeed can find many and close or shorten many gaps which have occurred due to the pandemic. But I would like to emphasize, most importantly, those aspects which showed great vulnerability in terms of COVID-19. So these are areas where circular economy for sure can contribute. So I don't know if this answers the question or if the others want to contribute.
Thank you. Thank you. You already mentioned remanufacturing and repairability, etc. So the one question is, what is your recommendation for products that contains critical raw materials, such as laptops, mobile phones, and in developing countries, when they become waste or considered to be old, how can we add value to these products in order to keep them calculating, beside all the things that you already mentioned, such as refurbishing and so? And should we consider development of companies in larger scale that can provide these services?
This question is addressed to me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so definitely, I don't know who raised this question. It's a very good one. So I have to just start with the question about remembering us. One of the very critical aspects of the circular economy is the design phase. If something is at the very beginning designed not to recycle, not to repair, not to refurbish, or so just to use it and dump it, it's very hard. It's very hard without subsidies to find additional values of such products. It's very hard. So I would say from the policy point of view, subsidized should be incentivized for extracting the value of these products. But the products itself, when designed in a way not to be refurbished, not to be repaired, not to be reused, or not to air anything, so it's very hard to create some value without incentivizing it. So that's my personal opinion. So I would like also to see the thoughts of Milan, maybe, and Andre on this.
I would love to jump right in if I could, because indeed, design is the most important aspect of this kind of problem when it comes to consumer electronics. We are actually working with a jewelry company here in Greece that collaborates with another company that manages to extract the precious metals from consumer electronics, and then use this precious metal to create designer jewelry that they can be sold a bit at a premium. But the majority of the cost coverage of this is actually from the marketing side of it, because they market it as something that does this. Otherwise, it wouldn't make a lot of financial sense for these companies to do this. So that's where the design element needs to come in, and also the regulatory push to come in to design these products, these consumer products, consumer electronics, in such a way that makes the extraction of these resources as easy as possible. So not only repairability and refurbishment, but also, let's say, taking it apart, decomposing these products in a way that can be done safely and easily. Sometimes they might also have leakage in the environment, so it's important to also take care of that aspect as well. But if the design would be incentivized to make it easy to extract these precious raw materials from consumer electronics, either for jewelry purposes or even to recycling for new consumer electronics, then I think there would be a lot more businesses that would pop up in order to do this. And in the meantime, the gap, like Vedat said, should be filled by the public sector.
I can maybe only add very shortly on refurbishing and remanufacturing that these are bigger infrastructural systems that you need to plan for. But take the case example of Renault. which has Charles de Leroy. I forgot what is the real name. If Andre can help me with this. They had for many years remanufacturing site, and basically what they were doing is learning how to produce, how to create a whole system around remanufacturing, refurbishing, and recycling. And now they have opened a refactory that is actually dedicated solely to this, departing the automotive parts, putting things in remanufacturing sites or refurbishing sites or recycling sites. So what they're trying, there was many years of learning for these kind of things, and all the while learning also affecting the market and affecting the policymakers to enable this. So in that sense, aligned with incentivization policymakers, but also adding to this, if there is a capacity, try to consider this learning by doing thing and slowly growing into impacts. And then actually when all the puzzle pieces are in place, then commence with refurbishing and remanufacturing. With in regards to the electronics, I don't have the straight answer because it's yeah, they're very much of a conundrum. There are a lot of precious metals there with very low quantities, and we need technology to depart them. And I will refrain for now for saying what is maybe the most obvious, because it's not maybe the best solution. So yeah, and this problem will definitely rise in our area, and we need to tackle it soon. So I invite also to have some systemic talks around what happens with waste, electronic and electrical equipment.
Milan, one question for you is how much companies are actually aware of life cycle of their products in the whole process? Because I know that you have experience with the companies.
They're becoming aware as we are progressing with questions. So not really much. They know about the value chain, as also shown on the graph. But when we start talking about the potential possibilities and value losses after the point of sales, it's actually blinking a lot of, new light bulbs, or light, as Veda would like to say, right? Of ideas of what might happen with their products, and what about this? Well, what if we try this or that? So they're not really aware of the life cycle. And yeah, and what I see in the future is that's actually some kind of a must in order to be in touch with the future trends, or the trends that are in creation currently on the markets of Europe and of actually European Union and all the rest of the countries.
I think that this will be all from the questions, because we're 10 minutes behind the time that it's supposed to follow this webinar. So I would like to once again thank you all for participating in this webinar. Thank you all speakers for an amazing presentations and the answer that they gave us. And I hope that we will see you on the next one. So thank you everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
And have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, Vera, Andre. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Oh, yeah, as a last piece of information for anyone that is still here, on Circular Economy Beacons, there will be, if not already, the schedule of next webinars with the topics. So you follow us or just subscribe for the newsletter, and you'll be informed.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to that. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.